the Steam Deck. Since I've had my Steam Deck for a pretty long time now, I have some thoughts that have lingered, but the Steam Deck had an opportunity to prove itself once and for all. I recently took a trip across 7 states, 1,300 miles, 10 days without my gaming PC. Let's just say I reached for the Steam Deck way more than I reached for the Nintendo Switch. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfie. You are watching GreaterThanPie, and this is a Steam Deck. Full retail sample. You know, Valve did not send this to me early, but they might as well have, because man, were there a lot of bugs. When I first got my Steam Deck, I was absolutely ecstatic. You guys can actually watch that video if you want. I've got it right over here, and the card's up there. I love the concept of this device. A gaming handheld that you can take with you wherever you go that runs your PC library. And on that front, Valve did a really good job. The Steam Deck actually can run almost a third of my library. And the games that don't work are games that have really invasive DRM, or are really old and haven't been updated, or have anti-cheat that requires kernel level permissions. Because of that, most of my library is here. And so there's not much to miss. During the trip, I did play a heavily modded version of Skyrim for around 80 hours. Yes, after sinking 250 hours into Special Edition, and that is after the 500 or so odd hours I spent in Standard Edition, I was able to put another 80 without an issue on the deck alone. And on the trip, when given a choice between my Steam Deck or my Nintendo Switch, which I had Metroid Dread on the Nintendo Switch, I was reaching for modded Skyrim of all games. And the only time that I would switch off to the Switch was after the battery died. Now the battery isn't insignificant in the Steam Deck. It runs about 2 hours while playing Skyrim while modded. And that's kind of impressive because, well, I can tell that the Steam Deck is using a lot of power to run this game, both processing and graphical. And the funny thing about that is that those 2 hours was usually about as long as it would take for my hands to go numb from actually playing the Steam Deck. Now, even with my large hands, which you can see completely cover the controls here, the Steam Deck can be a little bit ergonomically challenging. Now, ergonomic-wise, it is miles ahead of the Nintendo Switch. But unfortunately, when it comes to holding the deck for long periods of time, its weight plus additional inputs can make it a bit uncomfortable. Speaking of those additional inputs, this is a strong suit of the Steam Deck. There are an additional 4 grip buttons. There are an additional 2 menu buttons that are specific to the Steam Deck, and these 2 thumb-sized trackpads, which have both click and direction underneath the analog sticks. And the best part about these additional inputs is that the Steam Deck can remap them on the fly. This is one of the major features of the Steam Deck that have actually impressed me, and that is the UI and how it works. The deck toes a very weird line. Form factor, it is all console. But internally, it is related more to a PC. Sort of. You see, you still have an AMD system on a chip that is powering this device, which is very similar to the actual consoles like the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 5. But what you don't have is the locked down software that those consoles use. The Steam Deck runs a version of Linux, Arch Linux, and it is modified in a way that while in gaming mode, you don't necessarily know that you're running a PC. Valve has done this to such an extreme that calling this a PC when in gaming mode is a little weird, and calling it a console when in desktop mode is also weird. The Steam Deck is a weird device because of this, but at the same time, it is one of its major strengths. There is also hardware monitoring built into just a button press, battery monitoring as well, along with a ton of cool features like on-screen keyboards, being able to be accessed entirely through the UI, even while in game. And aside from the heavy nature of the deck and the questionable ergonomics, everything else feels great. The triggers are analog. The bumpers feel pretty fun, although a little difficult to press at times. A, B, X, Y feel perfect. The sticks feel great for their size. The D-pad is nice and responsive, and even these trackpads are pretty satisfying to use. The only buttons I didn't really use that much were the grip buttons, and that's just because sometimes there's not really much to assign to them. Now, I can imagine in a racing game, assigning something like the clutch and throttle to that would be probably pretty good. But at the same time, I didn't find a use for it in most of the games that I played. Touching back on controller support, the Steam Deck does natively support keyboard, mice, and controllers, and can do Bluetooth pretty effortlessly. Now, you are going to need to do an update to your Xbox Series X controllers if you have not done one yet in order to get it to work, but Microsoft did actually release an update right before this device really hit mainstream to make sure that their controllers did work. That being said, some controllers don't work in certain games very well. I found that the Xbox controller is the best compromise, despite having so many Pro controllers that I could quite literally just dedicate one to this device independently. Which then I guess brings me to the dock and the kind of mixed bag that is docking the deck. Now, they've come a long way. The dock does work like a Nintendo Switch now. You do just simply plug, and it works. But when in gaming mode, the Steam Deck can only really display out to 720p. Now, if you've got a 1080p monitor, that's probably not that bad and would look just fine. But if you're running the deck on something like a 1440p monitor, like I was, well, it doesn't look great. And I had to throw an M Classic into the shade just to make it look a little bit better. Now, you can get around this by switching to desktop mode, but those UI tools that I raved about a little bit earlier are shockingly missing. Yes, unfortunately, if you do put the Steam Deck into desktop mode, while it is a fairly open and almost completely bare bones version of Linux, you're left with, well, none of the creature comforts of the gaming mode. And it's not uncommon to move between the two modes in order to actually get something achieved on the Steam Deck that's a bit out there. If you are a tinkerer like me and you mod your games, you will spend a little bit of time in desktop mode. That being said, there is still an issue on the Steam Deck with phantom storage. Now, phantom storage specifically happens when you use primarily micro SD cards, which are actually a positive for the deck. The deck handles micro SD cards better than anything I've ever used in the past. The games library just switches like a cartridge in a Nintendo Switch, and it's just great. As long as you have the game closed, it won't yell at you, it will work in hot swap, and I love it. But because I do have more games on my deck than the internal storage can hold, there is an issue with the shader cache. Now, we did figure this out, and I did post a video about it, and I am going to be making a follow-up version that's more of a step-by-step tutorial on how to fix it. But at the same time, this is an annoying bug that beginners are going to have a very difficult time getting around. It will actually make it so that you can't even launch games. Valve, I hope you do fix this one soon, or at least come up with an option to like clear that shader cache out, even though that is entirely supposed to be a feature to improve performance. It has issues on the deck. So a bit of fair warning about that. And I'm gonna link my video so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Valve has done an amazing job of actually labeling and testing games for the Steam Deck. There are 3 labels you really should know about, and then one that's kind of like just a coin toss on whether or not it will work. There's the green label, which is Valve verified, works great on deck. This means that it has full controller support and that there won't be any wonkiness getting into the game or the settings. Yellow means that there might be some wonkiness. For example, Skyrim has a yellow label, even though it works perfectly fine, because to name your character, you have to put the on-screen keyboard up. Or there's also a launcher that you have to tap play on the deck to make it work. It works, it just has something weird to it. Red means will not work at all. And those games do not work. I actually had them crash my deck before, so don't try. If it's marked as incompatible, unless ProtonDB says otherwise, it is incompatible. And then finally, there's the gray label, which just simply means not tested. Now, games that are not tested have worked almost all of the time when using them, but these are games that are a bit more obscure. And Valve has really gone through and actually tested games that I wouldn't have even expected them to test. So if a game is untested, you can go to a site called ProtonDB, check to see if it looks like it's been played on the Steam Deck, and if it has, go ahead, download it. They've also taken this to the store where you can actually see games that are rated as great on deck and games that are, you like to wear this as a badge of honor. On the deck itself, it will even tell you if you're looking at a game that is great on deck. Now, there are some games that make perfect sense why they don't work. Games that are in VR won't work for obvious reasons. But since Valve has taken out most of the guesswork, it has made finding games for the deck really easy, and has actually become something that I consider when I buy a new game on Steam. But that wouldn't matter as much if it weren't for the performance of the deck itself. Now, all of the games we tested at the Steam Deck's native resolution of around 800p. And the reason we did this is, well, that is the target for the deck. So let's start with Cyberpunk 2077, which did about 30 frames per second with FSR, but it also has its own special Steam Deck profile that it automatically selects if it detects that you are playing Cyberpunk 2077 with a Steam Deck. Doom Eternal ran at Ultra Nightmare at 60 frames per second. Now, I know Doom Eternal will run on a toaster, but seriously, that performance is just awesome. Skyrim and Fallout 4 will run at 60 frames per second on medium. They represent our slightly older PC titles, and Skyrim, as you guys know, I ran with mods. And Borderlands 3 kind of rounds out our list as another hard to run game, and that one did 60 frames per second on low. And although this is not the best performance in the world for this game, the fact that you can even play it is pretty awesome. And it's doing all of this, by the way, with a single system fan that only mildly sounds like a jet engine. And now you can see why those 2 hours of battery life are not considered a negative in my head, because the Steam Deck can do this, well, while still being very portable. This is not a heavy device in the grand scheme of things. I've held much heavier portable devices, but at the same time, it's just impressive. And at a cost of $399, there is nothing competing against the Steam Deck. Valve has made one impressive PC slash sort of console that definitely toes an interesting line. Personally, I love it. And I will be using this thing for years to come. But I'm also a specific kind of gamer. I have a gaming PC. I have multiple gaming that I play regularly. And one of the best features of the Steam Deck for me is the fact that with my shared library, I can quite literally take the Steam Deck and just resume a game that I started on my PC. I play Skyrim for a couple hours on the PC and then just switch right over the deck. And it's so seamless and I love it. But I would not recommend this as your primary PC. There's no reason you should be using the deck as your one and only computer. It is a companion to your computer. Now, on the question of killing the Nintendo Switch, I really don't see these as competitors to each other. And the reason being is Nintendo lives, breathes, and dies by their first party library. And because of that, my Switch will always have something to play. As somebody who games on my gaming PC, most of the time, being able to just take this with me, with the game that I'm playing, makes it invaluable to me. That's where I'm gonna end today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, maybe consider giving a like, comment, subscribe. If you're gonna get a Steam Deck, now's the time. They're fully available. You can get the dock, and it's all up to you. So I'll see you in the next video. Wolfie, out.